Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard, and welcome back to the series finale of I've watched almost every Humphrey Bogart movie. As you can see, I've got the trench coat on today in celebration and to really get into character for our series finale. Now, so far, we have counted down all the way from 80 to 11. With this last episode, we will get into the top 10 and what I consider overall, in my personal opinion, the best 10 Humphrey Bogart movies ever. Now, of course, everybody is entitled to their opinion. Some people might agree, others might disagree if you're a Bogart fan, but I'm sure you can understand the general consensus of why I picked these movies where they are. Now, without further delay, I will take one last drag of my cigarette. After all, Bogey liked his smokes, and we will get into it. So, at number 10, we have, sorry, at number 10, we have The Petrified Forest. This is the first major stepping stone for Bogart's journey in Hollywood to climb up to become the legend that we know him of as today. Now, originally, he had done this as a play on stage many times with his co star, Leslie Howard. When Leslie Howard was asked to do the film adaptation, he agreed to do it under the condition that Bogart would be cast as Duke Mantee. At first, the studios were a bit reluctant because they wanted a more established actor like Edward G. Robinson or George Raft to do it. But because Leslie Howard actually had some power, and he had stuck his neck out for Bogart, Bogart ended up getting the role. And of course, he was a powerhouse in this. He was the epitome of being Duke Mantee, which, after doing it so many times on stage, doing it in the original film, that's why you noticed earlier in the countdown, I mentioned him doing a live stage play adaptation where he was given top billing, and that's part of why he agreed to do it because it was one of the roles that really helped establish him as a star. Now, the movie also stars. Sorry, I think my voice is a little weakened from having to do these episodes every day, so bear with me. I can feel it constantly cracking, which is why I have a glass of water and I had one last time. But yeah, as I was saying, the film stars Betty Davis, Leslie Howard, and of course Humphrey Bogart as Duke Mantee. They all put on incredible performances. A lot of the mannerisms and sort of the things that we know Humphrey Bogart for are all present in this film. And even though he was really a supporting role and not one of the main stars, which you would look at Leslie Howard and Betty Davis as being the top roles. He was fantastic in this performance because he really commands your attention with his stage presence on screen. He's incredible, he's charismatic, he's scary, he's intimidating, and this is probably why he got typecast as being the traditional gangster role so many times early on in his career, is because he did so well in this type of a role. This is probably the most quintessential role of Humphrey Bogart being this type of a character. And of course, the movie also features a notable appearance from the man who played Uncle Henry in The Wizard of Oz as Gabby Maple, played by Betty Davis, grandfather. He is very good in this movie, a very notable role for him. And of course, watching him, I was like, haven't I seen this guy? He looks like Uncle Henry from The Wizard of Oz. I looked it up. Sure enough, it was. But overall, this movie was really good. This was one of the first couple I actually watched the Bogarts, and it's what really became one of my favorite movies right off the bat because he's so good in it. Everybody else is so good in it. And Bogart was so grateful to Leslie Howard for helping to get him this role. They became lifelong friends. And when Bogart had his second child, his daughter, he named her in honor of him, Leslie Howard Bogart. So that shows you how grateful he really was to Leslie Howard for sticking his neck out to him. And of course, this is the beginning rung on the ladder in which would make Bogart the bigger star that we know and love him for today. That's why The Petrified Forest is number 10. At number 9, we have a movie called High Sierra, which is written by John Huston, who directed Key Largo and would go on to direct many more of Bogart's best movies. They became good friends while working on this movie. And this movie is the first time where Bogart actually started to play more distinct roles, and it was originally offered to George Raft, who didn't want to keep playing gangsters, so he turned it down. John Huston was actually happy that Bogart was selected because they became friends. And what Bogart plays in this role that's a little different from the normal gangster is he is actually playing type of character that is an anti-hero. He became the archetype of an anti-hero after playing this movie. Now, there's so many great parts to this story that make Bogart such an identifiable character, even though he is essentially the bad guy. I mean, by the end of this movie, I was a bit intoxicated watching it, so maybe I was a bit more excited than I normally would have been. But I was cheering for Bogart. I was rooting him on. Even when the police were chasing him and he's up in the mountains and there's the final sort of shootout going on, I wanted Bogart to win. The love interest with Ida Lupina is very well done. The side plot with the dog is cool. And also the fact that, like, at one point, Bogart helps this crippled woman who's lame in one of her feet. Basically, she has a clubbed foot. He basically pays for it to get operated on and fixes it with the help of a specialist. Of course, she rejects him, chooses a guy she liked before him, which breaks his heart. But then he kind of leans more on Ida Lupina, who's always been there and supporting him, even since the beginning of a big heist, which sort of went horribly wrong, but it was not her fault. In fact, he had originally wanted to send her away when really she had turned out to be his best asset in the heist. The dog, of course, that I had mentioned, actually has sort of a cursed backstory that everybody had who had owned the dog or taken care of it had mysteriously died. So it's sort of a bad omen that Bogart is constantly worrying about. And what I find very funny about this movie is there is a lot of heart. There's very humorous points to this movie, and it's just overall a very fantastic movie, which, like I said with the first movie I mentioned in the countdown today, this one also signifies another major career shift for Bogart that we would see a lot more of later on in the future. At number 8, we have In a Lonely Place, which is a very underrated movie. It was very underrated in the time. It didn't really seem to have the markability potential that people thought it would because it is a film noir, although there is a nice romance story. There is also some humorous parts in it. Bogart plays a very artistic, temperamental screenwriter named Dick Steele who falls in love with Gloria Graham, his neighbor's character. Of course, while he's trying to write a story, he hires a coat checkout girl to come and tell it to him. He pays her $20 to leave, doesn't really think much of the book. He's glad he didn't read it and ends up sort of trying to put his own spin on it. But the girl who told him the story ends up getting killed. They suspect that it's either him or it's possibly the boyfriend, but they're leaning more on him because of his temperamental history, his record, which one of the police who he's friends with says that's because of the PTSD pretty much when he served in the war with him. But they don't really suspect the boyfriend as much because he has a pretty solid airtight alibi. At least it seems so in the beginning. Of course, while all these horrible things are going on, he basically does show a heart of gold at times, despite his artistic, raging temper. And when the girl dies, he anonymously sends flowers to her grave. And at one point, while he's falling into this beautiful romance with Gloria Graham's character, who is getting pressured by the police, as is him, it leads to an altercation with somebody who almost cuts Bogart's car off. damages his car, calls Bogart a blind knuckle-headed squirrel. He beats him up on the side of the road while she watches, picks up a rock and almost kills him, in which she screams at him, "Stop, you're gonna kill him." He realizes, okay, maybe I am taking this too far, and he gets away. He does feel bad later on and ends up sending an anonymous amount of money under the name Joe Squirrel, as sort of a joke to when he called him a blind knuckle-headed squirrel, to the football player whose car he messed up and he beat up. So, what you see with this whole romance developing is Gloria Graham is helping him write the script. The script is quite good, but because she's seeing all these things, she starts to wonder if maybe he really did kill the coat check girl, whose name is Mildred Atkinson. And she has trouble sleeping. She has to take sleeping pills. She's becoming more and more distant. Whereas Dick Steele, played by Bogart, really doesn't suspect thing, and he wants to marry her. So it's getting to be a very tense situation. She confides in Bogart's agent. He says that you can't leave him like that. He has a lot of pride. He'll be too angry to take it. If the script works out good, at least he'll have something good to focus on. So she gives the script to the agent, who gives it to the producer and the director to look at. First, Bogart, when he finds out, gets mad, smashes his agent's glasses in a rage while Gloria Graham leaves the restaurant they're at. And then he does actually find out that the producer and the director love the script, so it's all good. He feels bad, apologizes to the agent, and understands that the agent wants to part ways, but sort of in a light-hearted way jokes that he needs to get the agent a new tie. When he goes back, he discovers that Gloria Graham has actually been secretly plotting a plane ticket to get away from him. In a rage, he tries to kill her. Phone rings up, though, and interrupts him. Police basically say they found out it was the boyfriend of Mildred Atkinson who tried to who did kill her, and basically he tried to kill himself, which when he left a suicide note, that's how they found out he did it. Now, an interesting thing is that when Bogart meets him earlier on, they shake hands and he points out that, oh, he's got a strong grip, must be from counting money. And the guy gives kind of an awkward look, like a taken back look from surprise, like, does he know? So that was one thing that I thought was very interesting. And another thing to note too is that this movie is one of the most iconic ones that Bogart produced under his own production company, which was unheard of at the time for an actor to do this, called Santana Productions, named after his boat. Now, after the police call them, Bogart hands the phone to Gloria Graham's character, who explains that, like, this would have meant so much to us a week ago, but now it's too late. As he walks out, he looks back with sort of a look of sorrow, grief, and he's brokenhearted. And she quotes a line from the script that they had written together, and it ends. It's a very dark, sad, somber ending, but overall, a fantastic performance from everybody in it. I feel that critics and the mainstream audience were a little too hard on it in its time, but I really do consider this one of Bogart's standout performances of his entire career. And what I noticed when I watched the Life and Flashes documentary is how they described a very good artistic outlet for his personality at the time, getting drunk and sort of busting people's chops, getting in fights, that kind of thing. He really was like this character in many ways. So you really get to see a perfect example of life imitating art and art imitating life in this movie. So yeah, that's why overall, In a Lonely Place falls in at number 8. As I said before, High Sierra was 9, and The Petrified Forest number 10. At 7, though, we have Deadline USA, which is overall a really good movie. Not a movie you would expect Bogart to play traditionally because it's very different from his other roles. It is a film noir sort of style of a movie with him playing a newspaper head who the paper is getting sold and it's going to shut down. He gets drunk to basically mourn the loss of the paper with his co-workers, and then he goes to visit his ex-wife. He's very funny in the scene. Bogart plays an incredible drunk in this movie, and it's very good. But at the same time, when it comes to being a newspaper man, he's phenomenal at his job, probably the best at it. And because the paper is getting sold to a competitive newspaper, they're basically going to rub them out of existence. And Bogart now has to try to fight to stop that. Fortunately, one of his reporters was investigating the death of a woman recently named Sally Gardner. It turns out that she was involved with a gangster who has been investigated several times and they couldn't make it stick, named Rienzi, who probably killed her. This reporter trying to investigate and dig up the dirt gets beat up and almost loses his eye, ends up in the hospital. So Bogart takes it on himself to use the paper in its last time that it's still independently on its own to really fight for what is right and bring Rienzi down. The widow of the former paper's owner decides she's going to counter the offer and buy it out herself, in which the court agrees because it's a higher offer. If the paper's reputation maintains its integrity and dignity, that they will sell it to her instead. So all seems promising until they bring in the brother of Sally Gardner as a witness to basically get his statement on what he knows because he was a part of Sally Gardner's death. But Rienzi's guys basically pretend they're police officers, pull him out of the paper. Uh, the brother tries to escape, but he gets shot and lands on the printing press, which entirely hurts the, you know, reputation of the paper, and it's going to get sold to the Standard. They're running out of time, but they're going to try and take down Rienzi in any way possible while they still can. Rienzi confronts Bogart, in which case he slaps him with the paper. Bogart hardly flinches because he's a no bullshit kind of guy in this. He really stands by his morals. And of course, the love interest with his ex wife is sort of put in a rut because they are separated and she's fallen in love with her former boss. He's trying to leave him, in which he basically refuses to just let her go willingly, confronts the boss of the newspaper, in which he really stands up to him, ballsy like a man, and it's great. Eventually, she does come back to him because she realizes that she does still love him after all this time, and it will never really fade, and leaves the boss she was working for. So, all this happens. The paper's about to be sold, but the mother of Sally Gardner comes in and basically gives the money that Sally was hiding for Rienzi, stolen, dirty money, and the diary that reveals everything leading up to her death. So now that they have the final evidence to put into the paper, they're about to run the last edition. Bogart's wife returns to him right as Rienzi calls him to threaten him that if he prints any more news about him, he's a dead man and to lay off him. But of course, Bogart don't care. He signals, print the edition. He's going down. And so he does. And he remarks to Rienzi, you hear that? And he's like, what? What is that? And he's like, that's the press, baby. And hangs up because he's got him. Rienzi's going to go down with the paper. Bogart's got his love return, and all he really has to worry about now is getting a job, which, because he's proven himself to be the most capable newspaper man around, shouldn't be too difficult. And so it ends kind of on a bittersweet note, very well. And another notable thing about this movie is that James Dean makes his film debut in a small cameo as one of the newspaper print boys. If you look very closely with the scenes around the printing press, you will notice him if you look closely for his face. Overall, that's why I had to put Deadline USA at number 7, and really an incredible movie. One of the first Bogart movies I saw, and still one of my favorites because he is just on fire in this role. And this is a later role. It did very well at the box office, and the success was good, which it rightly deserved. All right, so number 6, we have The Treasure of Sierra Madre. Another movie directed by John Huston, and one that is actually listed in the 100 greatest films of all time, which it rightly deserves to be there. It is a fantastic movie. It was actually shot in Mexico because John Huston demanded it to be so, which was kind of unheard of at the time and was sort of a monumental achievement. He based it on the book. Hollywood didn't really think that this movie was going to be as big or legendary or successful as it was at the time because there's no real market or romance sort of thing to really get people's attention like in traditional movies of the time. But this was a story of solid greed. And Walter Houston, who is John Huston's father, basically plays a prospector who helps Bogart, and Tim Holt, who plays Curtin, his buddy, basically go out into the mountains and look for gold. Eventually, Bogart goes crazy, tries to kill Tim Holt's character and steal all the gold for himself. He gets robbed by bandits who empty out the gold, thinking it's just sand to weigh down the sacks for the burros or mules, and it all gets wasted. And they laugh and realize, like, okay, it's not going to work out. But what is so incredible about this performance for Bogart is it's not the normal role for him, and yet he executes it incredibly. He starts out as a guy down on his luck in Mexico before he meets Tim Holt's character, living literally by begging change to survive. He can't get a very good job. He encounters a man who is a rich gentleman, an American, who was actually played by John Huston, and at first I suspected, is that him when I saw him and heard his voice? It was. And he's very good as a notable cameo in this. Eventually, him and Tim Holt get a construction job. They get ripped off, have to beat the guy up to take the money, together with the help of the prospector and a lottery ticket he had purchased from a kid who is played by Robert Blake in his first role as a child, basically end up getting more money, the money they need to go out and set off on this expedition. Now, along the way, a guy named Cody basically infiltrates their camp. He demands a share. At first, they're going to kill him, but then bandits come to try and take their weapons. They're forced in a shootout in which Cody gets killed. They find in his wallet that he had a widow, which is why at the end, Tim Holt's character, who survived getting killed by Bogart, lost all the gold, but basically they break their share in half so that Tim Holt can go and see the widow and tell her and Cody's child what had happened and comfort her and be there for him. And plus, they live on a farm with a fruit harvest, which is what Tim Holt always wanted to go back to. So it has kind of a funny, ironic, nice ending to it. It really is a great story of greed, and it's just an incredible movie, which I understand why this is one of the 100 greatest movies of all time, 100%. And this is one of four movies of Bogart where he is a main star in it that actually made it on the list, which is why AFI declared him to be the greatest American cinema star of Golden Hollywood back in the day, and rightly so. So, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre falls in at number 6. The Have and Have Not is number 5. Now, this is the first movie with Lauren Bacall, his fourth wife, and what is great about this movie is that you actually get to see them fall in love with each other as they're acting on screen. It's beautiful because the romance between their characters is so genuine. And of course, their nicknames for each other were actually what the director and his wife called each other. Kind of fun fact. Now, the story takes place during the war. Bogart is basically sort of like a rental fishing boat captain. Lauren Bacall's sort of a character who got stranded there, doesn't really have the money to leave. Bogart at first offers to help her out. She refuses because she wants to stay with him. There is also a notable cameo appearance from Hoagy Carmichael, the jazz artist who plays piano and sings, and actually plays while Lauren Bacall sings a number that they wrote for the movie. Now, overall, this movie is such a great movie. Like, Bogart is phenomenal. And considering this was Lauren Bacall's debut as an actress, a 19-year-old girl, she is equally on caliber with him, that's rare to see an actress do that. In fact, with a lot of the higher up movies on this list, you'll notice that rarely is it the case when the actress is able to match Bogart's charismatic energy on screen. And Bogart and Bacall became the iconic duo of Hollywood for that reason. They were so good together, so tough, so bold. And it's because they had met on this movie. Bacall was nervous as hell, but Bogart helped make her comfortable, and that's probably why they fell in love, why the movie turned out so well. It was directed by Howard Hawks, who also would go on to direct them in The Big Sleep, another iconic movie with the duo. This movie really is. I mean, when I was sitting there really thinking, okay, what's my top 5? I love this movie. The moment I saw it, the romance, the story, the acting, everybody, even the most minor character in this movie is so good. Like the drunk Eddie, who's a real sort of rummy. He's hilarious, very charming, entertaining. Like everybody in this movie is so good. It's such a great story. The acting performances are all just really top notch. And I could say it just didn't seem right to put any movie in this spot other than to have and have not, because I mean there is four movies I do think that are better overall for Bogart, but I really couldn't see that any other movie I have mentioned is above this one in particular at this spot, and that's why I had to put it in at number 5. For number 4, we have The Maltese Falcon. This is another one that is in the top 100 films of all time. This is really the shift that changed Bogart from just being the gangster or the ruggish, thuggish boyfriend who would get killed usually. Now, with this movie, Bogart plays a detective, and he plays such a very film noir style detective that you really wonder, is this guy honest? Is he shady? He basically is forced to help this woman out investigating a situation, not really knowing the full circumstances, when his partner is mysteriously killed, also investigating it with him. He's forced to figure out the death of his partner and help the woman. Of course, along the way, you see performances from Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and Elisha Cook Jr., who was most noted for being in The House on Haunted Hill and also has a great role in The Big Sleep. Now, these people are all after something that the woman that Bogart has been helping chase after, something called the Maltese Falcon. Now, at first, it looks like a black enamel bird. It doesn't really look anything that spectacular, but apparently, under the enamel, it's made of gold and jewels and is worth a fortune. Now, everybody wants this. This is why Bogart's partner was killed. By the way, his character's name is Sam Spade. That's probably a name people have heard before. That's because of Bogart. And they actually have tried to tell the story of the Maltese Falcon several times, but still to this day, this is considered the best screen adaptation of it, and rightly so. But yeah, Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre, Elisha Cook Jr., the woman, they're all after this priceless artifact, bird. Of course, during the case, Bogart ends up slapping people, really getting answers. He really seems like he's out for himself. He just wants the money. He gets drugged by Sidney Greenstreet and Elisha Cook Jr., knocked out because Peter Lorre is helping them as well. And then he wakes up. He has to try and get the bird before anybody else does. Police officer manages to get the bird to Bogart wrapped in newspaper, but he gets shot and he dies pretty much right after he delivers it. Bogart's secretary basically goes and hides it. The whole time there is this drama unfolding with the widow of his partner, who has always had a thing for him, secretly believes maybe he killed him. She's been spying on Bogart. Really, that isn't the case. But after everything kind of comes to the forefront, it becomes sort of a standoff where Bogart has Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and Elisha Cook Jr. Now, to square everything off as the private detective he is, he's willing to exchange the bird for a price, but he also demands that there has to be a fall guy. Eventually, they basically all are forced to agree that Elisha Cook Jr. is to become the guy. He doesn't really want to go willingly, in which case they're forced to knock him out and lay him on the couch. After all this happens, they basically do get the bird from Bogart's secretary. They chip away at some of the enamel, in which they find out that it's actually a fake. Of course, they're outraged by this and realize that the person they were hunting down must have given them a fake because they showed too much interest and probably believed it was more valuable. So they vow to go back and hunt this guy. And of course, Elisha Cook Jr., who is starting to become conscious, overhears this and leaves first to try and snag it from them in advance. They all rush out after him, basically give Bogart only $1,000 and instead of the 10,000 and leave. Bogart eventually has to turn this into evidence along with the bird and calls the police to inform, while he gets the story straight with the woman who has been dishonest, that it was actually her who had killed the partner and that Elisha Cook Jr. had killed the other guy they were investigating in attempts to get the bird. Now, because there has been romance between the two of them the whole time, she confronts him and basically says, "How can you do this to me if we really love each other?" And that's when he does his iconic line, which is in the Tales from the Crypt episode. It's also what I used in my music video, East Meets West, where he says, "Listen, this won't do any good. You'll never understand me, but I'll try once and then give it up." That part, of course, is the iconic line in which he says, like, okay, we might love each other, we might not. But the whole point is, I might act like I'm shady, but I have a responsibility because of my occupation as a detective to do the right thing, to avenge my partner's murder, to turn you in. And yes, we might love each other. There might be some sore nights after that. But if I don't turn you in, you'll always have something on me, and you might eventually try to take me out, knowing that. So the police come, take her away. He gives her a somber look of, "I'm sorry." She just turns away in sort of disgust, which reveals to Bogart maybe she really didn't love him after all and was just using him, as she did with the other men. Of course, the police remarks, because they've been thinking maybe he killed his partner and he's been up to shady shit all along, when really he wasn't, that what is this? And he says that the Maltese falcon, the black bird, the stuff that dreams are made of. And it ends. Very great detective film noir story. By far the greatest detective movie Bogart was ever in. And understandably, one of the greatest movies Bogart was ever in, as well as one of the greatest movies that has ever been made. And just fantastic. Fantastic performances from everybody. Great story, great acting. It had everything. And because Bogart actually played the hero, although it was sort of a melancholic understanding of his character's concept for a good chunk of the film, he really executed it masterfully, which is probably why he actually started to play some serious hero and good guy characters a lot more later on after this. At number three, we have the timeless, the legendary Casablanca. Of course, this is the most famous movie of Bogart's, what people consider one of the greatest movies ever made, and of course, another one of the 100 greatest movies of all time. Now, I put this at number three because this movie is incredible. Everybody is so good in this movie. We have Claude Rains, we have Sidney Greenstreet again, Peter Lorre as supporting characters. We have Ingrid Bergman, Paul Henry, Horace Bogart, and the romance story, the war story, the redemption arc. Everything about this movie is so good. It's also the movie that defines it with the iconic line that everybody knows Bogart for saying, "Here's looking at you, kid." There's so many iconic lines in this movie that have been referenced in pop culture and have been expanded on and reviewed and reinterpreted and reutilized throughout the years that it is just a timeless masterpiece. Now, objectively, the other two movies above this list are ones I like more. But if somebody said, I think personally Casablanca's the greatest Bogart movie of all time, I wouldn't say they're wrong. Objectively speaking, I could see that because this really was a movie that shocked people with how successful it was. This was a time when Hollywood was sort of printing movies out as sort of like a factory, one after the other. Not really much thought. They just thought, oh, it's just another movie. In fact, they didn't even have the script fully written as they were doing it. Bogart improvised the line, "Here's looking at you, kid." Like a lot of things had to be done on the fly as they made this movie. They didn't even really know if Bogart was going to get the girl. He plays a nightclub owner, um, Rick's American Cafe kind of thing. and he's like, entertaining the guests with his piano player, Sam, played by Dooley Wilson, who sings the main theme of the song, theme song of the film as time goes by. Of course, he actually was a very good singer. He was notably in the movie Stormy Weather and was actually on loan from another studio to be in this movie, in which he got the biggest payday of his entire career doing Casablanca. And I mean, he got to be in this iconic Bogart movie, so definitely well worth it. The producers and the directors didn't even like As Time Goes By, and I think it's a beautiful song. I believe it epitomizes the romance aspect of the story, which is considered one of the greatest romances in cinema history of all time. Yet they didn't like it. The reason they were forced to keep it in is because both Ingrid Bergman had actually had her hair cut to do the next movie already, so she couldn't come back for reshoots. Now, in order to interpret this into the movie more so, the composer, Max Steiner, actually used instrumental versions of parts of this song to interpret as sort of Rick and his love interest, played by Ingrid Bergman's characters, as sort of their theme. When they're standing on the tarmac before the plane's about to take off, and he says, "It ain't hard to see that the problems of three people don't amount to a hill of beans in this world." Like, all that. It's like, and then at the end, well, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Claude Rains, he's so funny in this. There's a lot of humor, there's a lot of action, suspense, there's a spy thriller to this, there's the noble cause of the war. It's actually considered America's greatest propaganda film. The beautiful romance story, the reminiscing on the past about how, like, Bogart and Ingrid Bergman will always have Paris, all these things. It's a timeless masterpiece. And usually, when I mention Humphrey Bogart, to the newer generations that don't know who he is, all I really have to say for them, if they know him, if they've heard of him, even to the slightest molecule or thread of understanding of who he was, you mention Casablanca. Oh, Casablanca. Yeah, the great legendary movie. Everybody seems to know it. That's why I say, if somebody was to say, I think Casablanca is Bogart's greatest movie, objectively speaking, yeah, I could agree. I could say it. Is it my personal favorite? No. However, it's number three. It's up there for me. It is definitely a masterpiece. I love Casablanca. In fact, every time I've watched it, I've loved it even more. The one part that they use in Tales from the Crypt too, they use several parts for that episode from Casablanca. Like the one part where he's like, "It seems that destiny has taken a hand," or the other part where it's like, "Nobody ever loved me that much." Like all these things. That's why those are such iconic moments. Like that movie is just overall, it's so good. The only reason it's at number three and not number one is just because personally I like the next two movies on this list a little more. And when I explain why, I think it will become apparent to the audience that I have a valid reason for my opinion. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but you'll probably see some truth in what I'm saying and why I come up to this conclusion of my own perspective. Now, because I've actually gotten farther in this list quicker than I expected, um, I am gonna take a quick couple drags of my smoke before I reveal the top two. But yeah, Casablanca number three. I'm sure you already know that, like, that seems fitting that it would be in the top 10. At number two, we have The African Queen. Now, the reason I put this at number two, and it is also another one of the 100 greatest movies of all time list. This really was one of the first Humphrey Bogart movies I saw. I believe it was the second, actually. The number one movie is the first one I saw, which maybe that's why it holds a special place in my heart. But The African Queen was the second one. I'd heard people talk about it. Bogart, because he was nominated for an Oscar three times. The First time was Casablanca. He didn't win it for Best Male Actor. He didn't win it for The Caine Mutiny, but he won it for The African Queen. Now, this movie is a wartime story. There's the romance with him and Katharine Hepburn. They actually filmed it in color and in Africa on location. The visual scenery, the comedy parts of it, the romance, the serious sort of help out the military against the German story, the treacherous peril of these people struggling to make it down the river in Africa, the fact that it was a real life struggle to make this movie in Africa while they were doing it. Katharine Hepburn got really sick. The only reason, in fact, most people filming and working there on this movie got sick. The only reason Bogart and John Huston, who directed this, no surprise, like he directed The Maltese Falcon too, he directed a lot of the best Bogart movies. He and Bogart were good drinking buddies. They were drinking a lot of scotch. And so any fly that bit them dropped dead. They were drunk off the scotch instead of drinking the water. Katharine Hepburn actually wanted to maintain sobriety because they were getting drunk, and that's why she got sick from drinking the water. She also almost got killed when John Huston was hunting elephants and a herd of them went on a stampede, which he felt terrible for. Now, Bogart admitted he hated to go there to travel this far away from his home in Hollywood to do this, but he wouldn't have done it for anybody else but John Huston, which John Huston actually took as a compliment because they were good friends. And Lauren Bacall actually did accompany him, even though she wasn't in the movie. She accompanied him to help take care of him and everybody else while they filmed this movie. I mean, the romance between Katharine Hepburn, and who are so unlikely um, as a couple in the beginning, is a very beautiful character development and transformation. The way Bogart's getting drunk off the gin and really seems like he really could be drunk in that scene is just, he puts on one of the greatest performances in his entire career. He is so good, and I feel like Hollywood recognized that this really was one of the greatest performances he had ever done. And there were so many he did do, but if they were ever going to give him an Oscar as Best Male Actor, that this was the one he deserved it most for. And I believe it's rightly so. Overall, I love The African Queen. I mean, it was an independently made movie and it made so much at the box office. The producer made a fortune. Now, originally, the director and the actors offered a cut of the vending proceeds when it went to theaters and just opted for a negotiable, standard check, giving the vending rights to this producer who made a fortune. Ironically, this producer was actually blacklisted from Hollywood later on, but he sure made a nice cash grab with The African Queen. But yeah, overall, The African Queen really is an amazing cinematic timeless masterpiece, and I really do consider it the second greatest Bogart movie ever made. Like, I do put one above it that I personally like more. I could see why people might think Casablanca is his best, but I believe if you're going to have a conversation about the best Humphrey Bogart movies of all time, you can't have it without mentioning The African Queen, which is why it rightly deserved to be at number two. And I mean, the story, they managed to travel all the way down the river, get to sink this German submarine with homemade torpedoes because Bogart plays a riverboat captain who's sort of a mechanical genius. During the storm, their boat ends up getting messed up, almost sunk, but not completely. It's still sort of floating in the ruins of it. And they're on board the big Louisa German ship. They're about to get hanged, in which Bogart requests that they get married, since a captain of a ship can marry two people. Before they get hanged, they get married. And then, right as they're about to get hanged, the remains of the African Queen, in a sort of watery grave, struck the ship with the torpedoes and blow it up, in which they jump off the boat, escape, they're swimming towards the nearby shore, and they're singing the classic song that Bogart actually made up for the movie, but he had heard it from his father sing it to him as a kid, an old sea shanty called The Bold Fisherman. There was a bold fisherman set sail from off Billingsgate to catch the bull piggy and the gay mackerel. But when he got off Pimlico, the winds did begin to blow, and the little boat wibble wobble so that overboard went he, singing Twinkie Deedle Dum. Twinkie Deedle Dee was the highly interesting song that he sung. Twinkie Deedle Dum. Twinkie Deedle Dee, oh fisherman. And he actually sang it for a radio broadcast, in which, when I actually saw that in the documentary, I was like, oh, he really could sing, because he sang it actually quite beautifully. So it's funny because he's singing it very drunkenly and half-assed throughout a lot of the movie. But as they're singing the song, swimming back to shore, even Katharine Hepburn starts singing it because she's heard him singing it several times throughout the movie, which is very funny. Like, it shows their bond and their growth as now a newly married couple. And that's why I'm sure you could understand from this description. That's why I had to put The African Queen at number two. Definitely my second favorite movie and one of the best Humphrey Bogart movies of all time. At number one, here it is, the ultimate of my list. We have Sabrina. Drum roll. But seriously, the reason I picked Sabrina, and some people might be kind of surprised, like, it is a notable role of his. Bogart actually got his biggest payment as an actor making this movie, which would have been the equivalent of $3.5 million in today's standards. Back then it was 350,000, which is still a lot of money back then. Nowadays that would be the equivalent. But the reason I put this as my number one is because Audrey Hepburn is actually my favorite classic actress of the golden era. Now, to see both of these two legends, my favorite actor, Humphrey Bogart, my favorite actress of this time, Audrey Hepburn, in a movie together was like a dream come true. I actually wanted to, because I had heard the reputations of them after watching the Tales from the Crypt episode, I wanted to get into Bogart. So when I actually discovered that they had a movie together, I was like, I gotta see this movie. And of course, all the stars aligned. Fate took a hand, and sure enough, they had a free version to watch, which I downloaded it before they took it off on YouTube. And now I forever own that movie, but I got to see it. It was the very first Bogart movie I ever saw, very first Audrey Hepburn movie I ever saw. And I loved them both so much in this movie, this romantic comedy where Bogart plays a big shot businessman and overall, and Sabrina basically plays the chauffeur's daughter. It is such a great, funny, beautiful romantic story. Everything in this movie is so good, and considering Bogart wasn't really known for just doing a standard romantic comedy, he is so great as Linus Larrabee in this. He really is at the top of his game. This was in 1954, so he was getting up there. This was near the end of his life. He had about 3 more years left to live. But this was one of the really timeless masterpieces and one of the greatest movies he ever made right towards the end. So he just kept getting better and better, in my opinion. And then Audrey Hepburn, this was her second big movie after Roman Holiday, where she won the Academy Award, or the Oscar nowadays, as Best Female Actress. She was still new to acting. She was a bit nervous, which kind of frustrated Bogart because she would take a lot of time to get her scenes right. Now, later on, when the film was complete, Bogart was eventually proud of it. When he was asked about it, he actually said, "Yeah, it turned out to be a very good movie. There's just one thing I don't get about it." And his friend asked him, "Oh, what don't you get?" He's like, "If I were Audrey Hepburn, why would she pick me over William Holden?" Sort of like a nice, sort of good natured humor, like he's the younger, more handsome guy. I'm the old guy. Why would she pick me? But if you watch the movie, you could see that right from the beginning, he was the most charming of the two brothers. William Holden plays his brother in this. Very good actor in this movie, too. And he actually saved her life because she was so depressed. She was in love with William Holden's character. He didn't notice her as the younger brother, David. Linus found her like trying to gas herself with car exhaust in the garage with all the doors locked, all the cars started up, carries her after she faints up to her room and looks after her. And then, of course, she goes to Paris, gets educated by her cooking school to learn how to cook. Her father sends her there. He's the chauffeur. He actually won the best supporting actor role for this. I I, I don't want to freeze the video to look up his name. So, uh hold on. I'm going to use my phone just because I don't want to freeze my computer by doing this. Bear with me one moment just so I actually can get the name right. I just don't want. If I use my computer to look it up, I might freeze the video. I have that actually happened. I had done about half an hour of this episode before that had happened. Um, and I was not impressed that I had to restart this entire final episode again. Oh man. You know what's terrible about that is John Williams is his name as Thomas Fairchild. The problem is with my phone, I can't go on the Wikipedia because it tells me connection is not secure. I can on my laptop, but for some reason my old Huawei phone is kind of a pain with that. No idea why. But basically let me read the IMDb synopsis if I can, if it'll load. Okay, plot. So, after her return from school in Paris, a playboy finally takes notice of his family's chauffeur's daughter. Sorry, it jumped. Who's long had. Sorry, froze again. Who's long had a crush on him, but he questions his more serious brother's motive when he warns against getting involved with her. Linus and David Larrabee are the two sons of a very wealthy family. Linus is all work, busily running the family corporate empire with no time for a wife and family. David is all play, technically employed in the family business, but never showing up for work, spending all his time entertaining and having been married and divorced 3 times. Sabrina Fairchild is the young, shy, and awkward daughter of the household chauffeur, who has been infatuated with David all her life, but whom David hardly notices till she goes away to Paris for 2 years and returns an elegant, sophisticated, beautiful woman. Suddenly, she finds she's captured David's attention, but just as she does so, she finds herself also falling in love with Linus, and she finds that Linus is also falling in love with her. Sabrina Fairchild grew up in an apartment over a garage on the sprawling Long Island estate owned by the Larrabees, for who her widowed father works as the family chauffeur. Fairchild and the other estate servants are aware that Sabrina has always been in love from afar with the Larrabees' younger son, several times married, but currently single playboy David Larrabee, who has never noticed her except as the gangly kid on the estate. The Larrabee's older son, Linus Larrabee, has always been the responsible, hard-working one of the two siblings. He focused so much on making money now, running the Larrabee conglomerate of businesses, to have a personal life. As such, neither he or Sabrina ever really noticed each other beyond their roles on the estate, not really knowing anything about the other. David also works for the company in name and on paper only, as he goes about his fun-loving activities as his day-to-day life. Linus, however, is not averse to using David's personal life for business benefit, such as publicly announcing David's imminent marriage to Elizabeth Tyson, the daughter of a prospective business partner, an engagement about which David knows nothing. David likes Elizabeth as a casual girlfriend, but he has no intention of getting remarried. This move coincides with Sabrina's return after a 2 year absence away at culinary school in Paris, something she initially did not want to do in not wanting to be away from David, because and despite her unrequited love for him, which was also one of the reasons Fairchild sent her away. Sabrina's time away has let her grow into her own skin, she now believing that she can truly can shoot for the moon, whether that moon be David or anything else. David falls in his brand of love with this new sophisticated version of Sabrina, who he didn't even recognize upon first sighting. Linus, in turn, subversively takes whatever direct action to ensure David marries Elizabeth, regardless of his new infatuation with Sabrina. Through these proceedings, Sabrina may truly come to realize what her moon is, and if it is achievable, that road which may have some possible heartache along the way. So, as you could see, it's a very good story, and I mean, the ending where basically there's a lot of humor in this movie, a lot of really funny parts, but the romantic part, the really great epic ending of this movie that just made this a masterpiece for me is when David's kind of taunting um Linus's character and sort of like mocking him to try and get a rise out of him about how, oh, Sabrina just wanted to use him for money anyway. He snaps and punches David, but it reveals that it's because he really loves Sabrina himself and just didn't want to admit it. But David already prepared for this. He's got a boat waiting on the harbor to go after Sabrina, who Linus sent away as part of getting her out of the way so that David could marry Elizabeth. However, at first, he was going to get her away entirely and just leave her there with gifts, but he felt bad because he was starting to fall in love with her. Thinking she still loved David, she was basically going to get paired with David in Linus's mind. However, David realized that Sabrina actually had fallen in love with Linus now instead and sets it up so that Linus will go to be with her. While she's on the boat sailing away, courtesy of the Larrabee family's money, she's sitting there on a beach chair on the deck of the ship, and a mate basically comes over and asks her to straighten a hat, which was a common thing she did with a hat like this to tilt the brim. And she does so, and that's what she used to do for Linus all the time. She wonders, I wonder who asked me to tilt their hat for them. She's looking when Linus comes strolling on. Remembering that she said before not to have an umbrella in Paris, he realized that he had forgotten to leave his umbrella behind. He casually leaves it on somebody's trench coat, and they embrace in a warm hug and kiss, and they're finally together. Now, beautiful romance story. So many funny parts. The part with the champagne glass, which you'll have to watch it to get what I'm talking about. That was just priceless. And the way it kind of repeats itself at the end with the father of the Larrabees, also very funny. And just overall, this was one of the most amazing movies I've ever seen. It's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. Not only just the Bogarts or Audrey Hepburn's, but just overall one of my favorite movies, period. Which, as Bogart's movie and Audrey Hepburn's, I had to put it at number one. Now, since we have finally made it to number one, I will do a brief recap of all the others from 80 to 1, and we will conclude this episode. I won't give a description because that's what the previous episodes were for, but I will wrap up the list and count down all the way from 80 to 1. At 80, we have the TV version of The Petrified Forest, the live stage play adaptation. At 79, we have You Murderer, the Tales from the Crypt episode with archive footage. At 78, we have The Love Lottery with an uncredited cameo. At 77, we have Two Guys from Milwaukee with uncredited cameos from him and Lauren Bacall. At 76, we have Women of All Nations, but his scenes were deleted from the final cut. At 75, we have Body and Soul, which I've still never seen, and it's very difficult to watch according to what I've looked into. At 74, A Devil with Women, same as above. With 73, still have not seen it, but eventually I will get the DVD to see it, even though Bogart only has a small cameo in this. At 72, we have Midnight, aka Call It Murder, when it was re-released because Bogart became a bigger star and retitled. 71, A Holy Terror. 70, Swing Your Lady. 72, of course, being the start of the main countdown. 71, 72, Swing Your Lady. 69, The Return of Dr. X. 68, Love Affair. 67, Men Are Such Fools. 66, Thank Your Lucky Stars. 65, Bad Sister. 64, Two Against the World. 63, Up the River. 62, Big City Blues. 61, Three on a Match. 60, Virginia City. 59, Isle of Fury. 58, Racket Busters. 57, Crime School. 56, Action in the North Atlantic. 55, China Clipper. 54, San Quentin. 53, Cross the Pacific. 52, Dead End. 51, Brother Orchard. 50, The Oklahoma Kid. 49, Invisible Stripes. 48, You Can't Get Away with Murder. 47, The Great O'Malley. 46, King of the Underworld. 45, Stand-In. 44, Kid Galahad. 43, It All Came True. 42, Battle Circus. 41, The Amazing Dr. Clitterhouse. 40, Halfway There, Dark Victory at 40. 39, The Wagons Roll at Night. 38, Chain Lightning. 37, The Big Shot. 36, Knock on Any Door. 35, They Drive by Night. 34, Angels with Dirty Faces. 33, Key Largo. 32, Marked Woman. 31, Sahara. 30, Bullets or Ballots. 29, We Are No Angels. 28, Passage to Marceau. 27, The Enforcer. 26, Beat the Devil. 25, The Harder They Fall. 24, The Left Hand of God. 23, The Desperate Hours. 22, The Two Miss Carols. 21, Dark Passage. 20, Tokyo Joe. 19, The Barefoot Contessa. 18, The Kane Mutiny. 17, Dead Reckoning. 16, The Big Sleep. 15, Conflict. 14, All Through the Night. 13, Black Legion. 12, The Roaring Twenties. And 11, Sirocco. Now counting down the top 10 which we revealed today. 10, The Petrified Forest. 9, High Sierra. 8, In a Lonely Place. 7, Deadline USA. 6, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. 5, To Have and Have Not. 4, The Maltese Falcon. 3, Casablanca. 2, The African Queen. And the number one choice, my personal favorite, in my opinion, of course everybody is entitled to their own, but number one, Sabrina. So, I hope you enjoyed this series. I don't want to take up anybody else's time because this episode has already been quite long. I felt it was just, since we're doing the final top 10, wrapping everything up with this series to really go in depth. But I've taken up as much of your time as I feel I should. And, I think I've spoken about this list, explained my reasons for it, rightly so, as much as possible. Now, objectively, some people might have slightly different opinions. But I'm sure that if you watch this entire series, you could see this is why they all fall around here for me. Now, of course, I am interested to anybody who watches this series to tell me what your favorite Humphrey Bogart movies are, what your perhaps top 10 are. Of course, if you watch them all, then feel free to give me your exact 80 list or 72 list, whatever. But I am interested to hear anybody's feedback, their comments, and their opinions, and it would make for a very wonderful discussion. So until next time, I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard. Oyasumi Nasai, Matane, peace out, and as the legend, may he rest in peace, Humphrey Bogart used to love to say, as quoted from Casablanca, here's looking at you, kid. Have a good one. And thank you for watching the conclusion of the series. I've watched almost every Humphrey Bogart movie. Moving forward too, I will also just quickly mention that I will start doing the live album discussions again. I am going to figure out a way to make a playlist of all the previous episodes, figure out where the last album I discussed was in my discography, and then start making ones for all the albums I've released since then that I have not made an episode for. So please stay tuned for that. And regarding the Stephen King reviews, I am reading the 41st book, and after I get more books for the collection, hopefully in the future I will resume doing those as well. But stay tuned for further updates for that because till now, it's to be announced. And that's all. Have a good day, everybody.